Hello and welcome back. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV. Welcome back to another weekly used gun review. Remember, in these videos, we take about 8 used guns that have come through the door and give you about a 2 to 3 minute micro review of each one to give you guys an idea of some different things that are out there on the market. Remember, the point of this video is not to sell you anything. These are intended to strictly be educational and informative. Anyway, guys, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into it now. Alright, remember the format of these videos is we start off with the most common and move through the least common as we move on, starting us off at our number 1 spot. You guys just saw this gun used in our Taurus G2C versus G3C video. If you haven't checked that out, you might want to if you want to know the differences between the older version, the G2C, and the new one that just came out, the G3C. Now, the G2C did hit the market a couple years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, as an update to the PT111 G2 Millennium Pro series of handguns, which has been out for quite a while from Taurus. These are actually phenomenal handguns for the money. These things price brand new at about the $230 to $250 price point. Double stack 12 round capacity, compact 9mm, good competitor to something like the Glock 19, the Springfield compact, the Wesson compact M&P, the Springfield XD compact. So they fit right in there, but they are about half the price, and they actually do stack up pretty well. They are known for their reliability and their durability. They do have a pretty long trigger pull, but that's something you can get used to. If you do see one of these on your used dealer shelves, now of course right now under the time of the pandemic and all that stuff, the prices are hugely elevated. But under normal circumstances, these things used are going to be about $100 to $150, maybe $175, but they are relatively inexpensive. Right now, with the elevated prices, we're seeing these sell at about the $250 to $300 price point, which is what they are new, but it is pretty difficult to find a new one right now. So that's, kind of explains the elevated pricing. Taurus really did hit a home run with this design. I mean, for the price point and what you're getting for the money, the nice adjustable sights, the trigger safety, the manual thumb safety here on the side, the loaded chamber indicator. It really is a really good package, especially for somebody on a budget. And really, you don't even have to be on a budget to make this your EDC. It's just a good, overall good quality firearm, and I really do like it. It has been a top seller in our store for the past 2 or 3 years. So if you do run across one new or used, definitely don't overlook it. Really, really good option. Okay, up next I have the standard model SIG P320 in the full-size frame configuration. This one here is a 9mm, and like I said, it's in the full-length configuration here. Now, the P320 is a very interesting one from SIG. It came onto the market in 2014, following the 250. The SIG 250 is just like this, except it was hammer fired. The 320 would basically be the same package, but in a striker fired configuration. Now, you would have these in basically 3 size frame configurations: the full size, the compact, and the subcompact, and 4 calibers: 9, 40, 357 SIG, and 45. 45 came on much later. The 40 and the 357 SIG, of course, you can interchange just by doing a barrel swap. They use the same magazines just like anything else. Now, of course, what has made the 320 most popular was the XM17 handgun trials that were won by SIG. The biggest contenders to that were like the Glock 19X, more or less the M9A3, although that wasn't admitted into the trials. But those were the big competitors. SIG won in a configuration a lot like this. One of the big things a lot of people would argue would be their contracting pricing, but another thing was the modularity, and that was another thing that made the 250-320 series a really big winner and a very innovative design concept. Basically what you have, if you notice, there's a little cutout here in the side of the frame and a window in the serial number. The serial numbered part is actually the trigger mechanism. So you could then, by removing the takedown pin, you could remove the trigger module and get different frame size grip configurations for about $50. Midway USA would sell them. I don't know what they're pricing at right now, but if you had a compact and you wanted a subcompact frame, you could just spend $50, get the other grip module, take out your fire control group, put it in the other module, and now you have a smaller gun without having to A, purchase a completely different firearm, and B, do multiple transfers and background checks for different frames, which you would have to do on most other products if you're switching size. These are really excellent guns. Now, they did hit a little bit of a snag about 2 or 3 years ago with their drop safe issues, and actually you can tell that this is the old trigger. They did have a optional recall. It was not mandatory. You could send back your firearm and they would put in a new trigger. The trigger contours are a lot skinnier than this. This is the first trigger that has not been back for recall. So if you are looking at one of these used, look for that thinner trigger. Of course, there's nothing wrong with something like this. You'll just have to either get the components and switch it over to the new trigger or send it into SIG to have them do it. And this is totally fine. It's just not altogether drop safe. So all the testing that they had done found that it will discharge if there's a round in the chamber and you drop it on its butt there. So something there to consider. A really, really cool, a really popular design, brand new. You're looking at, under normal conditions, the SIG P320s and the standard frame. Now they do have the X carries and the versions with the Romeo optics and all that, but just the basic configuration is at about $500 to $550. Used, you're typically around $400. Now right now with all the craziness going on, again, expect to spend about $200 to $300 more for the both new and used configurations of the SIG P320, but a big winner in the SIG lineup, a very popular handgun, and I definitely recommend you take a look at one if you see one on your dealer's used gun shelf. All right, up next I have a Winchester Ranger Model 120. Now these would come onto the scene in 1986 and last until about 1988, so only 2 years with about 5,000 being made. Now this was meant by Winchester to be an economical version of the Winchester 1300 series. What they did is they put a lower grade of wood, they scaled back on some production cost saving measures to get something that was more affordable into the market. Now they were intending for this to be geared towards or marketed more towards police department use, but actually it was a huge success within the civilian market, with about all 5,000 units being sold to the civilian population. Now this particular one is a 20 gauge. Of course they made them in a 12 as well, with I believe a 24 and 26 inch barrel, and this is a vent red barrel as well. As there were not a whole lot that were produced for the civilian market or that were produced in general, there's not a whole lot of people that had the 120s. There's not a whole lot of nostalgic purchasing momentum behind these, but the pricing is still pretty low respectively. When these first came out on the market in the 80s, they retailed at about $160 new at the time. Right now they're going between about $150 to $250 used under normal circumstances. Now of course, because of everything going on right now, the prices are up about $100 on them, so they're going for around $300 in good condition. But for a good starter shotgun, they still make a good option. Pump action with a rotating locking bolt, very durable. Of course the 1300 line was really meant to be an updated, cheaper and replacement line to the Model 12. So anyway, just a good overall fit, feel, and function firearm. And again, if you see one hanging around for $250, $300, might be worth taking a look. Just might be a good weekend deer gun or something like that. So cool to see it come in. All right, up next I have a pretty popular pistol here. This is a Beretta Model 21A Bobcat, which is a tilting barrel semi-automatic design, obviously from Beretta. Now this would come onto the scene in 1984, and it would replace the Beretta Model 20, which was also a tilting barrel mechanism, which was itself discontinued in 1985. And actually Beretta had ceased production on these temporarily and just resumed production mainly in the stainless type finish, and you have that on the 21A and the 3032 Tomcat, which is the 32 ACP. Now they made this in a 22 and a 25. This one here is a 22. The interesting design features about this, or the most iconic thing about it, is the tilting barrel system. So there is a latch right here on this side. You rotate with your thumb and it pops the barrel open. This does a couple things. One is it can give you a pretty quick way to see if you have a round in the chamber. Also, another thing it does is for people who have weaker dexterity issues, hand strength issues with racking the slide, you can just remove the magazine, fully load it, then top the barrel open, put in one round and close, and then of course when you go to fire, recoil is going to start cycling off the magazine, so it saves you from having to rack the slide. Now this is an exposed hammer double single action design. The trigger pull weight on it is not bad at all, especially if you're on single action. Of course it'll stage to single action every single time you pull the trigger, and there is no decocker function, but there is a manual safety right here on the left hand side of the firearm. One other interesting unique thing about this is there actually is no extractor. So basically the firearm depends on the expanding gas that's coming rearward, that the pressure is basically forcing the spent casing out of the chamber after being fired. So they can be pretty picky on the ammunition types that you're using in them, especially in the 22 configuration. Now, brand new, the new ones that are out now are typically going to MSRP around $400, or actually retail, I'm sorry, between about $400 to $450. The older ones, something like this, you know, typically about $300, $350 to $400 price point. They made them in the blued, which is a carbon steel. It's an alloy frame with a carbon steel slide and barrel, or they made them in the stainless steel as well. And of course, the stainless steel is going to be a little bit more expensive. Wood grips add a little bit of value. They also came out with a black plastic set of grips as well. And then typically in the older ones were the little square cardboard blue Beretta boxes. So if you find them complete with that, I mean, I've seen them get as high as $500, but they're typically not too pricey. Beretta did make a pretty good amount of these, although they do have a lot of collector appeal and a lot of people still get them, and they still do make really good concealed carry options. So these are very popular. When we get them in, they are fast movers. Really, really cool little pistols, especially in a 25 or the larger one, the Tomcat in a 32, could be a really good viable defensive handgun. So just a unique pistol to get in. I'm happy to get this one in and share this with you on the video. All right, up next I have another interesting and unique pistol out of Spain. This one here is made by Astra, and it is called the Firecat. It is a semi-automatic 25 ACP vest pocket size pistol, about the size of maybe a baby Browning, so just a very, very tiny handgun. Like I said, 25 automatic. Now these would be made throughout the 60s by Astra in Spain alongside a pistol called the Cub, and the Cub was an exposed hammer version of this. Now this is hammer fired, but the hammer is internal. On the used market, these aren't super expensive in this condition. It is matching about 90%, I would say about $300 is about where they're landing. So they've gone up a little bit over the past couple years. Now they could make a really good deep concealment pocket handgun as a backup, or it could just be a good curiosity and interesting thing to take onto the range and just add into the collection. It does have a couple safety features, including a grip safety back here, similar to what you find on like a 1911. It does have a magazine disconnect, has a 6-round capacity single stack magazine with a heel European style heel release here at the bottom. There's also a safety here that when engaged here, when you bring it back, it pushes the safety lever into a notch which holds the slide open. So if you want to keep it open, of course you open it while it's on safe, it does lock open. If it's off safe, of course it works as a slide release too, but if it's off safe and you pull it back, it does not hold open. Also has a loaded chamber indicator here on the back in the form of a little pin like on a P38. Also from this position with the slide open, that's how you disassemble it, by rotating the barrel, taking the slide off and all that. Cool little firearm. I mean, I don't think I maybe had one other one of these in here since we've been open, so they don't come in too common. Just a cool, unique handgun. Trigger pull on it's not that heavy, with a nice positive wall there, just a little bit of take up. So I mean, just a cool overall little handgun design. Not much else to say about it, but glad I could share it with you guys here on the video. Okay, up next is another pocket pistol. This is kind of turning into the pocket pistol weekly used gun review video. This is a Smith & Wesson Model 61. This is a -2 Escort, also known to people as the Pocket Escort. Now this would come onto the scene, in 1970, and only last until about 1973, so about a 3-year production. It was sort of plagued with reliability issues, only being offered in .22 long rifle. It was very ammo specific and actually was not very popular. Now this particular one is a 61-2. They had the 61, the 61-1, 2, and then 3 by the end of production. The 61-2 specifically is they added a barrel nut to it, and that was the change that they had made. Of course, with Smith & Wesson, every time there's a new dash, that comes after a production change to the design. So, of course, it wasn't around that long, so only made it to the -3. This is a 5-round capacity, detachable single stack magazine, semi-automatic. And what's interesting is the barrel is actually down here, sort of integral to the frame, and the slide actually is just cycling as a sort of a bolt carrier, if you will, just to cycle the rounds into the chamber and extract them. That's basically all it's functioning as. There is no hold open. Now, when you pull the trigger, it will keep the trigger locked to the rear until the magazine is removed and then reinserted. So, kind of an interesting feature there. So when you are empty, of course on an empty magazine, you don't have to do that when it's loaded, but when the magazine is empty, instead of holding open, it just kills the trigger until you put in a new magazine with ammunition. Then the trigger, of course, starts resetting, and then you can continue to use it. So an interesting design concept there. Now, prior to the development of the Escort, You did have legislation that prohibited imported, especially cheap, small caliber pocket firearms from coming in. It was kind of the whole Saturday night special curtailing of crime guns and that sort of thing. So Smith & Wesson saw that as a way to come into the market with something that could replace those firearms which are no longer there for import. Of course, like I mentioned, it still was not very popular. Because they were only produced for about 3 years, they are pretty uncommon. Only about 65,000 of these would have been made, which is actually pretty good for 3 years, but still not as prolific as a lot of other things on the market. Now these, although they are a Smith & Wesson, they do not have a huge collector following. The pricing on these is not very high. Something like this in this condition, it would be about the $300 price point. Of course, in a little bit better shape, and actually this is very good. I'd call this about 90 to 93%, maybe a little bit better. But with its original box, probably get you up to about the $400 price point, which is where these are going to top out. Now you did have a version like this with the brown grips and the blued finish. You also had a nickel-plated version with white grips. Those, of course, are going to be a little bit more valuable than this one, so maybe adding about another $50 to $100 in terms of the valuation on it. But anyway, a very interesting, unique firearm. I don't believe I've actually ever had one in here before. Pretty sure this is our first one, so really cool to get that in here. Very unique, very interesting concept design, and happy to share that with you on the video. Okay, up next is an interesting one. You guys got a sneak peek of this one on the most recent gun store vlog. This is a Walther P1, or actually this one's labeled P38. The name change would come in 1968 towards the end of the year. This is actually in 1968, but was made before the name change. P1 given to it by the Bundeswehr, the new German West German forces after World War II. So the story goes with the P38 in World War II. Of course, it came onto the scene, as the name would suggest, in 1938, being an ancillary and somewhat of a replacement to the German P08 Luger, although the Luger did maintain production until the end of the war, by Mauser, most predominantly. The P38, wartime P38s were made by Spreework, Mauser, and Walther did make the most of them. Of course, they were a detachable 8-round single-stack magazine, 9mm, double single action with an exposed hammer. Now, they were very, very popular, and of course, they made popular war trophies from vets coming home from World War II, and those, of course, are a lot pricier than a P1 like this, and those can get up, you know, the $1,000, $1,500 price point, all matching. So there you go. Now the P38 would go on to development of things like this, the P1, and of course have a lot of inspirational, or give a lot of inspiration to things like the Beretta M9 and earlier versions thereof, like the 1951. Okay. The P1 was a little bit of a design adaptation. You would typically see this phosphated type finish, and the biggest thing is the frame was no longer steel, it was an alloy, making the gun cheaper and easier to produce and just a little bit lighter. Now, after the war, because of arms production curtailing that were brought on by post-war treaties, of course, Germany had rearmed despite the Versailles Treaty after World War I. Production would be brought up by Maneurin in France. Actually, Karl Walther had gone to work with Maneurin and continued production of things like the PP, things post-war, used mainly by French police. Now, when Germany was allowed to rearm and create a military, of course, Walther Olmdo, I know I'm mispronouncing that, but back in Germany, they were able to take up production again of military firearms, and of course, the P38 or the P1 would start up production again in Germany. Now, as mentioned, this is a 1968, and of course would be used by the Bundeswehr, the new German military forces. This one's West German marked and also imported into the United States by Inner Arms. Now, the value on these things is quite a bit less than a World War II era P38, which I said again, those would be around $1,000 to $1,500 depending on matching numbers and condition. Something like this is typically between about, actually recent years, they came in through a lot of importation in about the 2010, so like 2010, 2011, a lot of these came in and they were about $300 to $350. They have not come in as surplus for a long time, and probably we're not going to see them come in big shipments anymore. But right now, these are up to about $500 or $600, which is pretty typical. So still for about a little more than half the price of a P38 if you're just looking for a shooter. A nice P1 like this, and this one is all matching and excellent condition. It's just a good alternative option. Of course, remember, there is no World War II history here, save for the fact of the design itself. So it has the look, the feel. If you want to go shoot it, you're getting a similar experience. So these are really, really cool firearms. I don't get very many P38s or P1s into the shop very frequently. I've had maybe, between the two variations, I've had maybe 2 or 3. So they're very uncommon. People tend to hold on to them, so it's just really cool when you get one in. Okay, last but not least is the Smith & Wesson Model 36. Now this one holds a very important place in Smith & Wesson revolver development. Now, in the late 1940s, about 1947-48, like every other American-based arms manufacturer, they were recovering from wartime production. So they were getting a lot of their time and attention back to R&D. They were getting a lot more material and resources to put into development of other firearms, and of course their personnel, which could pivot over to new projects. Now at the time, they needed to focus on the civilian and the law enforcement market, as of course there was not going to be any future or moving forward need on the military market again, as World War II had just ended. Smith & Wesson noticed that there was a need in the small concealed carry revolver type of market. Now at the time did exist the Colt Detective Special, which came out in the 1920s, and it was gaining a lot of traction and actually single-handedly taking a lot of market from Smith & Wesson, specifically in the concealed carry market. Now the Colt Detective Special, which by the way was featured in our last, it was number 8 in the last week's weekly used gun review video, so go take a look at that. But that was a 6-round capacity 38 special. They were offered in a couple other calibers as well. Most prominent the 38 special. Now at the time, Smith & Wesson only had a 32 caliber revolver. They needed to up the game and up the pressure acceptance, or the durability of their frame in the small concealed carry market, so they introduced the J-frame. The J-frame, which is very popular today and come out in things like the 442, the 642, the Bodyguard, and other things like it, was ushered in by the Model 36. This was the first of its kind. Now, this of course was chambered in 38 Special and featured a 5-round cylinder, which was 1 round less than the Detective Special, but with that, a lot of people found that the durability was very good. Also, the size was just a hair smaller than the Colt Detective Special. Now, these would come out onto the market in 1950 with a huge amount of success, and they stayed in production until 1999. And then in 2008, they would come out again under the Classic series, so you can still buy them today. Now at the time, you know, in the 1950s, these retailed at about $150 new. Brand new, used now in this condition, you're looking at about the $500 price point. So they are not super expensive. They did manufacture a lot of them, so they're not that uncommon. Now, along with its prominence in the concealed carry as well as the police market, it was dubbed and also given the name the Chief Special to go along in accordance and good competition with the Detective Special from from Colt. So a really nice counter anchor to that, and also a very interesting and pivotal time in Smith & Wesson revolver development, especially in the concealed carry J-frame family. So that's really, I'm always happy to see a 36 come in. I haven't had too many, just a couple, 2 or 3, but happy to feature this one here for you in this video. And if you do see one, take a look. Even a viable option for today for, you know, again, $400 or $500, maybe a little bit more in the box and a nicer shape. Just a really cool collectible, and definitely has a lot of nostalgia for a lot of people. Well, that is all the time I have for you today on these. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out this video. If you enjoyed, please let me know by hitting that like button. And also, if you enjoyed this video, we do upload them every single week, so please make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification button so you are aware when we are posting these videos and other content. Anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and leave you off there. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV, and I will see you next time.